Finally got Agatha all along, episode 7.
In the end,
React to this to emergency also.
Rio. All roads lead to me.
Death. Oh, hell
Welcome back,
no.
everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Agatha All Along episode 7 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs, references, big reveals, confirming a lot of fan theories, including what's actually going on inside these different trials the witches wrote that they've been walking this whole time. So we'll break it all down. If you're
See,
brand
he
new
be
to the
breaking
channel,
down
be sure to
everything
subscribe to get
perfectly.
all the episodes. And careful for
That's why I
spoilers
like
if you
watching
haven't
his
seen the
video.
episode yet. But just starting at the beginning, work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs, WTF moments, and really big details. The episode title was Death Hand in Mine, which is a reference to the next line in the song, The Ballad of the Witches Road. Each of the titles of the episodes have been lines from the actual ballad itself. And it's a reference to Rio being the cosmic entity Death, which we'd believed for a long time now. Like, there'd been a couple stronger confirmations, but now they literally just said it out loud. Death Hand in Mine is also meant to be a reference to her relationship with Agatha.
When you
like
see
they've
some of those
literally
powers,
been a
though,
couple for a while, which Agatha admits
I guess
to
she
at
can
the end
only
of the
get
episode.
you
Like,
if
what can I
she's
say? I
if you're
like the
dead.
bad boys. Agatha's kink is literally hanging out with Death herself. Thanos off in the corner somewhere, simping for Death, mad that he's not with her instead.
What time Agatha
I
got her?
erased half of all life in the universe, and still, you won't be mine. If you haven't read the original comic
Agatha
book
took
Infinity
it,
Gauntlet storyline, that's the whole reason why Thanos in the comics snapped half of all life to try and impress Death to win her hand. And it did not end up working. Death did not care about him. He got really pissed off. It did not go
You
well.
can't do it for the woes.
Them is to court death.
There was that brief line at the end of the first Avengers movie about courting Death, and that was meant to be as close as they ever got to the actual Thanos loves Death storyline in the original Infinity Gauntlet arc. But the other big reveal here in Rio being Death, the original Green Witch, is that she was never meant to be part of the Coven because they confirmed the Blackheart, the actual Green Witch
So
that
she
was part
was
of the
just
Coven,
there.
was meant to be Billy this whole time. The way the showrunner explained it, Rio this whole time has been more of a cosmic tourist, just hanging out with them, having fun while they're walking around this version of the
So
Witch's
this
Road.
whole time it was
The whole
Billy.
reason that Rio came with them is because she wants the dead bodies of all the witches who are overdue, like they should have died a long time ago, meaning they've extended their welcome, essentially. She's also probably pretty interested in claiming Billy, too, because he was supposed to die when the Hex came down, and he is not dead. Early theory, that might be the next big type of trial they face in episode 8 before
Is gonna
the
be in
finale,
the
because they
Hex. They're
literally
gonna be
have to
going
face
crazy.
Death herself. Because they just killed off the Salem 7 at the end of this episode, meaning that they're not meant to be the actual villain of the series. I think it's meant to be Rio herself, Death herself. She literally says in the episode, all roads lead to me, and they're walking the Witch's Road. So the Witch's Road leads to Death. This week's episode was more of a fairy tale pop culture parody of witches from famous movies and stories, playing on Lilia's hatred of the stereotypes about witches caused by movies and TV shows, with everybody playing different famous witches. Agatha is the Wicked Witch of the West, which she implies was actually based on her in real life, which was kind of funny. Lilia Glinda, the Good Witch, both from The Wizard of Oz, Billy is Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, and Jennifer is the Wicked Witch from Snow White. The opening scene starts with Lilia in the middle of a black void, which is her seeing her eventual death, which she talks about later, like I saw myself falling, setting up some major reveals. Like, for instance, they've been inside Billy's Hex this whole time underneath Westview, the abandoned subway tunnels that Miss Davis mentioned. That's why when they fall through the road, they're inside the subway tunnels beneath Westview, because they literally just walked through Agatha's basement into what seems like Billy's Hex. I think there have been a couple clear points during the past several episodes. Like, if you rewatch the episodes, thinking that they're inside Billy's Hex, a lot of the moments make more sense. And what's happening is that Billy has been transforming it on the fly with his reality
Surely
powers,
not,
because he has the
'cause
same
it's a
powers as
Witch's
Scarlet
Road.
Witch in the comics, without actually realizing what he's doing. Like, Billy thinks that he's on the actual Witch's Road, but like in the first episode, when they make it to the road, notice that Agatha clocks that this isn't the actual Witch's Road. Like, she picks up the dirt like, this is interesting.
It's exactly how I pictured it.
Yes. Suits you.
She tells Billy this suits you. She makes a lot of references, like the detective
So it's
Agatha
not
that
the
she
Witch's Road,
typically
then.
is, even when she's not inside Scarlet
It's
Witch's
Billy's
Hex.
Hex.
Agatha seems like she clocks immediately
I
that
don't
the
know about
Witch's Road that
that.
Billy thinks that they're on isn't the Witch's Road that she previously traveled. So that's why you see Lilia and Jennifer through the episode running around through the tunnels with the Salem 7 also running around through the tunnels underneath Westview. This whole time on the show, they haven't been in an alternate dimension. They've been inside Billy's hex, and it's just that Billy unconsciously used his power to create the hex inside these, like transforming the tunnels
Just like
into
his mama.
hex. It's the same concept with Scarlet Witch creating the hex in Westview. She didn't know that she was creating the hex, and she didn't know how she did it. She said she just felt this incredible swell of emotion and grief, and it just came out of her. Remember, way back in episode 2, when they traveled to the Witch's Road, the door would not open until Billy came screaming downstairs, super afraid of being killed by the Salem 7.
That makes
And
sense
when the
now
door
then.
opened, it glowed with blue energy.
If he made the
Billy's
hex.
energy. So it's like Billy immediately created his hex then, and they literally just walked
That's
down
kinda
into the
crazy,
tunnels,
though.
which were his hex.
So much
What the
like
hell?
your mother.
Gosh, you really are a Maximoff. Otherwise, none of this would be nearly as dramatic.
Early theory, this is what Agatha meant when she said you're just like your mother, Scarlet Witch.
So only
and this wouldn't be
Agatha
so
knows is a
dramatic if you
hex.
weren't a Maximoff. Like, the WandaVision series was very dramatic because Wanda developed this entire fake
If
reality
that's
to
for
just
real,
live
then
out
that's
her
crazy,
grief.
though.
And now Billy is kind of doing a version of that with his hex underneath Westview. Just like his mother, Scarlet Witch. Like mother, like son. Real mama's boy. The other big piece of evidence that they've been walking around inside Billy's hex this whole time, which is inside the tunnels beneath Westview, is all the Easter eggs inside his bedroom correspond to things that they've encountered on the road, like all the Wizard of Oz figures, the castle, all the different figures that they turn into during this episode. All the different posters, the Wizard of Oz references in
So it's
general, the
basically
idea
what he
that
wanted to
Dorothy
do.
basically travels to the land of Oz, but all the people in the land of Oz in that movie, which they also reference in this episode, are people from her real life on her farm. All the people in Billy's coven here are people that he encountered in real life and things that are around his room here. So it's sort of like his own mind is unconsciously creating this hex and
So he just made a
transforming
mini
reality
hex
based
instead
on all
of
those things.
a whole
You guys can let me know in the comments. I feel like
Westview.
there were a couple clear moments in this episode where there are references to this just being Billy's hex, and he's pushing reality, like changing things on the fly without realizing what he's doing, the same way that Scarlet Witch did inside the hex, changing things without really understanding what she was doing. But at the beginning of the episode, Agatha and Billy continue to walk the road. Very little time has gone by since the end of last week's episode. Agatha's still covered in mud. Billy claims he's not trying to read her mind, but she's super insecure about it, their relationship at the moment,
probably
because
was.
they really hate
He
her.
just
He
couldn't
just
do
tried to
it.
kill her, but couldn't get his power to work on command. Like I said, because I think this is all a function of his mind, and he's blocking his own power inside this hex of his that he's accidentally created. It's the same concept with Lilia blocking her own powers and her grandmother telling her, what happened to your
And
power?
then see how
it's
he
been there this
reacts
whole
when he
time.
finds
You've
out.
always been at 100% power levels. You just blocked yourself from accessing it, which is basically what's happening to Billy right now, too. Billy still doesn't realize that this is a hex of his creation, which is why he can't fully control it the way that Scarlet Witch eventually could control the hex. Early theory, we'll probably learn about that in the last 2 episodes. But this whole joke about
So
him
Wanda's
reading
probably
Agatha's
gonna
mind is
find
also
him.
a callback to
Because she's
WandaVision when
gonna
young Billy
find
tried
out
to read
about
her
the
mind
hex,
and
probably.
told her that he liked her because she was quiet on the inside, which is such a horror movie kind of thing to say, like the creepiest line ever from this little kid. Meaning that at that time during WandaVision and now in present day, Agatha is using her magic to block anyone from reading her mind. Notice he asked what happened to Rio here. A couple people later in the episode also reference what happened to her, like, where is Rio? What's going on with Rio? I think now, confirming that she is death, she's off busy claiming souls while they're talking
We're probably
right now.
gonna
That's
see
why
her
she
at the
isn't
end of
here.
the episode.
Agatha also tries to brush past it too, like she doesn't want to answer what happened to Rio because she knows the truth. She references being his babysitter on WandaVision. Agatha being a babysitter is also meant to be a reference to her comic book origin, being Franklin Richards' babysitter in the original Fantastic Four comics. When she was introduced, she was just
I wonder
referred
if
to
she's
as
gonna
the
be in
nanny,
the
and then later they
Fantastic
explained that her
Four
name was Agatha
movie
Harkness.
or series,
Maybe
whatever
someday
it
they
is.
can cross her over
think
with
it's
the
a movie.
Fantastic Four characters once they come to the MCU, so they can actually pay that off. She says she was Wanda's ex-best friend because she betrayed her and tried to take her power at the end of WandaVision. Then there's an interesting twist. Notice Billy says Scarlet Witch isn't his mom, it's Mrs. Kaplan who is his mom. Like, I have a mom already. That's because Billy's memories
He's in
have mixed with
denial.
William Kaplan's memories, they explained in last week's episode. And I think they're trying to say that he doesn't know where Billy begins and William ends, which they also question again during this episode, but stop short of answering the question because it's meant to be Lilia's trial. I think the idea is that Billy will eventually answer that question in episode 8 or episode 9, like the actual finale. He'll realize who he really has become. And I think the idea is they're trying to imply that he's become an amalgam of both of those personalities. So, like, he's not entirely just Billy Maximoff anymore and not entirely William Kaplan.
He's gonna feel some type of way because he built the Hexa.
A fusion of the characters from the comics, because in the comics, his name is Billy Kaplan. But I think the thing about him not considering Wanda his mom right now is also to explain why he doesn't care about finding Scarlet Witch on the road right now, only Tommy, but that's just for now, and that will obviously change in the future. Agatha repeats her similar reference from episode 1, which she tells him that Wanda is dead. Maybe? No. That's also them calling out the theory crafters too.
She's
like,
not.
Maybe she's dead, maybe she's not dead. I kind of
She
saw a
is
body,
not
but who
dead.
knows who else saw it. Basically leaving open the back door for how they're going to explain what happened to Scarlet Witch and how she's coming back for
Trust
Avengers
me,
5.
ain't no
Doomsday,
way they
Avengers
killed her
6
off
Secret
like
Wars,
that.
because she is supposed to come back during those Avengers movies, and we might see some references to her or a cameo scene of some kind in the Vision TV series in the next couple years too. We'll see about that. I think they're mostly concerned with bringing Tommy back first, and then seeing Vision come back, like White Vision come back, the original version of Vision, then Scarlet Witch comes back. They really want to give Elizabeth Olsen a break from the MCU for a couple years so she can go off and do other TV series, other movies, then come back and do a whole bunch of stuff. They see the next trial as a spooky fairy tale fantasy pop culture castle. Remember, Halloween also next week in real life too, which is why
it's
they're
gonna be a
airing
double.
both episode 8 and episode 9 together,
gonna be
because they
nice.
want the episodes to air right before Halloween. When she says
On
the road
Wednesday,
is
I
a
think
fickle
they were gonna
mistress,
come out
and Billy replies,
both.
I think that's more of clever foreshadowing that Billy is the road himself. Like, Billy created the road, his hex. And inside, he's kind of fickle right now with his emotions about Agatha and everything that's happening. And Agatha is just clocking that, like, you're being kind of fickle right now. When he questions whether Agatha has ever been on the Witch's Road or if she lied about that, like I said, I think the whole idea here is that Agatha did walk the Witch's Road, but the
It wasn't
real
that one.
Witch's Road, not the Witch's Road that Billy has created.
That's why Agatha
as his
knows
hex.
it's not
This isn't meant
that
to be
one.
the actual. The idea is that Agatha's experience doesn't really help them because it's Billy that's rewriting the rules of reality on the fly, and he's being very fickle, as Agatha said earlier, so she can't actually predict how to help them trial to trial. You also notice as they continue to walk towards the castle, the road is yellow for
The
Yellow Brick Road, aka
Road.
Wizard of Oz, which we saw all those Easter eggs all over Billy's room. More evidence that this is just Billy's hex that he's using
Houdini.
his mind to create without realizing it. You also notice the phases of the moon on the doors to each of the trials corresponds to the poster with the phases of the moon inside his room as well too. Like I said, very Wizard of Oz in real life. Like, you were there, and you were there, and you were there. Like, all the different things around his room make it seem like they're things that show up inside the Witch's Road without him thinking about it that way. Everybody now hoping that he doesn't wake up like he's waking up from a dream at the end of the episode. It was all a dream.
That's probably what
That'll
it's
be a
gonna
pretty
be
lousy
at the
payoff.
end.
They walk inside and immediately change.
He's
into
gonna
the
wake
pop
up
culture witches
from the
Agatha
car
reveals
accident.
The Wicked Witch in the Wizard of Oz
And it was all
based on
just
her
a
in
dream.
real life originally, meaning
But
that
he'll
Ella
find
Frank
Tommy.
Baum met her at some point in the late 1800s, then went on to write the original Wizard of Oz story that the movies were all based on, which she seems really proud about. You also notice that her Wicked Witch outfit is highlighted with purple, her usual color. The tarot card table reads, your path winds out of time. Obviously, we know now that this is meant to be a reference to Lilia, but it takes them a while to figure out what this trial is all about, whose trial it
They
actually
thought it was
is.
Billy's trial.
Lilia's ability allows her to see across time, forwards and backwards, and she experiences time in a non-linear kind of way, very much like what we saw during Loki Season 1 and Loki Season 2, with him jumping around through time, backwards and forwards. There are a couple of jokes here about
We need
both
more
of them not
Loki.
really being great at reading tarot. Agatha knows way more than Billy does, but they just have a couple of jokes about them fumbling their way through it, trying to read each other's futures. He pulls the Chariot card. It's meant to reference overcoming conflicts and moving forward in a positive direction. One needs to keep going on through sheer hard work and commitment, and you will be victorious. The whole idea that they need to continue their
Yes,
quest
sir.
down this witch's road, which, like I said, we think is Billy's hex. They said at the actual rules of the trial, every time they do something incorrectly, a sword falls from the ceiling. And
They
it sounds like
almost
all the
killed
swords
themselves
themselves are
doing
based
that.
on pop culture swords. So if you think you can identify which actual swords these are, let me know in the comments. The next card, the Seven of Swords, is meant to mean a bunch of different things. When the card is upright, it can indicate that someone's been dishonest, that you might have been resorting to underhanded methods to achieve your goals, manipulative behavior. But the way that Billy explained, it's meant to be reversed because he's the person here who's been more duplicitous. Although technically Agatha's also been lying about what's been going on with Rio and Death. So both of them have been lying, but also kind of telling the truth at the same time. Agatha grabs the cards from him and also starts making more mistakes, causing more swords to fall, almost killing Billy. Then the stakes
You
go
lucky you
up
move
as the
out the way.
ceiling starts to be lowered while this is also happening too. And here's one of the next big confirmations I think that they're making that they're actually inside Billy's hex, because the minute that he says he wishes that Lilia were there, boom, immediately she shows up in the
Yeah,
trial.
that is kind of
Just
crazy. I
like
ain't gonna
something
lie.
similar
It
would
might be
happen
the
inside
hex then.
WandaVision in the hex, where
What
Scarlet
the
Witch would just think
hell?
of something and boom,
We
snap
all
her
being
fingers
fooled
and it would
again.
change. Then throughout the episode, they start jumping around in time to show Lilia's experience. Like, we're actually seeing this from Lilia's perspective, and because she experiences time in a non-linear way, we go backwards and forwards through the last couple of moments inside this actual episode. We see her and Jen both in the underground tunnels beneath the road walking, claiming that she was also falling in that black void of nothingness, which we learned was her foreseeing her own death. Jennifer claims that Lily has been having a bunch of her other visions, telling her all these things and then forgetting them promptly, which we find out later, like we get some of the gaps filled in later flashbacks. When she says they needed to walk the tunnels and look for shelving, those are the bookcases that allow them to get into the actual trial later. She references Rio again because the minute they got kicked off the road
They
and
need to
she
watch
sort of
out
came,
for
she stood
Rio.
up, she heard Rio speaking to her. Oh, you
She
know
gonna
who I
come
am.
after
All
them.
roads lead to me. And seeing her grisly visage, like with the skeleton face that she saw when she saw her grandmother in episode 3.
Oh,
Jennifer also
hell
reveals that Lilia
no.
filled her in on everything that's happening with Billy being Scarlet Witch's son, this very heartfelt conversation they just had in the tunnels next to the subway car or the subway station. Like I said, they're basically trying to tell you that Billy created a hex inside the tunnels beneath Westview underneath Agatha or Ralph Boner's house. That's why they're walking around in the tunnels here and they see the subway station. I think the
I
idea
didn't
too
even
is
clock
that
that.
the roots
I'm
that glow
surprised
here
someone
are meant to
did.
represent the boundaries of Billy's hex, the way that the red walls did during Wanda's hex in WandaVision. So when they're walking around here seeing the
So he
glowing roots
pushed
on the
them out of
side
the
here, they're
hex,
actually
basically.
walking outside, like outside the barrier of Billy's hex. We get another payoff from one of her future visions in an earlier episode when Jennifer calls her Wispy, and they do a bunch of flashbacks to explain her doing all these future visions. Some of them have not been paid off yet, but they do a quick recap just to remind you, like, oh, we're going to be paying all these off really soon. Then she starts seeing visions of her grandmother back in Sicily when she was a little girl. This is the same grandmother that we saw Rio claiming in episode 3.
I
And
didn't even
apparently
know that
she's
was
jumped
real
back into the
also.
past when her grandmother was
Now we know.
teaching her for the first time how to read tea leaves. In the way they explain it, this is literally her time traveling, but it's just her consciousness traveling across time. It's not meant to be like Loki, where Loki's body was traveling across time. But if it wasn't clear why she's talking to her grandma or what's going on during this scene, this is her literally traveling hundreds of years into the past, back when her grandmother was still alive and when she was a little girl. It's just her older
And her
mind
grandmother
transported back
knew,
into her
too.
younger body. And because her grandmother also had the same ability, and all the women in her family line, her
That's
ancestors,
kind of cool, though.
she says that she must be visiting, which is what her grandmother calls it when they're jumping across time, meaning that her grandmother
Go
had
have a
done this before,
conversation
too,
with
at some
them.
point.
One last one.
They said at the whole idea that her grandmother has to eventually give her the pep talk and tell her that the power was always within, like, you never lost your ability, you just forgot about it, like you just chose not to use it. And the idea that she must have a witch must have a coven, which is also meant to be a callback that the coven has to be there to help solve each of the different trials. They have to work together to solve the trials. No one person can do it by themselves. Which I think is also foreshadowing for how the finale goes down too. Like, Billy won't be able to complete things or beat death on his own. It'll take everyone working together to do it. Also, the idea is that he'll be forced to trust Agatha again, which he doesn't want to do right now. When they're back in the tunnels running from the Salem 7, Lilia starts to think that she's been getting visions more and more frequently because she's close to her death, or because she's close to the end of the road, but I think it's meant to be one and the same thing. Like, she's getting the visions again because her power is coming back, but also because she's about to die. She jumps forward in time again.
She
to
had
the
a lot
actual
of vision.
trial,
It kept
confronting
going
Billy,
back and
pissed
forth
off at
the
him
whole
for
episode.
everything that's happened and hiding the fact that he is really Scarlet
And
Witch's
then
son.
her
And he
emotions
starts
were all
reading
over
her mind.
too.
Love the way they have the conversation without her having to speak, and she's mad that Billy didn't use his power to save Alice. Like I said, because this is all a creation of Billy, like because they're walking around inside Billy's hex and he can warp
She probably
reality,
knew too.
maybe that's a way to explain how the other witches who we thought died can actually come back. Like I said, whole Wizard of Oz kind of concept here, like they travel to the land of Oz, but in the Wizard of Oz story, Dorothy wakes back up in reality, and all the people that she thought either died or befell terrible fates are there around her bed when she comes back to reality. So early theory, everybody that you think is dead starts to remember the past from before she made the sigil and starts explaining things like, this is why I did all this stuff. She reveals that night at the bar mitzvah, she saw everything that was going to happen to him and understood, like everything from the car wreck to young Billy Maximoff taking over his body, and knew that it was Scarlet Witch's son entering his body and what he would turn into, the power he would come into. She says the sigil was meant to prevent other powers, like other witches, like the Salem 7, even Death, Rio, for example, from finding him and challenging him before he was ready to face all of them on his own.
He's
You
gonna
also
have to
notice
face
this
them
being
now.
kind of a bad thing. The sigil prevented Scarlet
all
Witch
over with.
herself from sensing Billy one town over, basically, which would have negated the entire plot of Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. You get to see Lilia saying to him, "Oops,
So that's
sorry,
why
my bad, dude."
she couldn't find
When
him.
she talks to her grandmother again in another flashback, she mentions her first coven, like basically the coven that her grandmother had, her family essentially. She explains they all died in a really, really bad fever during that period in history, just because medicine wasn't that good back then. Her grandmother basically tells her the whole secret here is to just go with the flow, basically. There
Cheryl,
is no
bro.
controlling her power. It's just for her to accept things as they happen, like see things as they happen and divine meaning from them. Basically to accept things that will come without being able to control them, which is her accepting that she's
that's it.
going to die, which is why she's
Right
not
there.
afraid to die at the end when she sacrifices herself to stop the Salem 7. Like, oh, this is supposed to happen. She goes back to the tunnels beneath Westview and then finds Billy's journal, which she eventually gives back to him. That will probably be important for the last couple of episodes, why she would have given it to him.
He's gonna need those
When she
spells.
peeks inside the walls past the bookcase to the trial, I feel like this is a Christopher Nolan Interstellar reference when he was traveling through time, looking through the past at all the bookcases. And just as Billy wishes for Lilia again, she and Jennifer fall through the bookcase door. Like I said, more evidence that Billy is controlling reality inside here in his hex, the way that Wanda was inside her hex. And I think the idea is that Agatha knows that, but for some reason she hasn't revealed that to Billy, probably because she doesn't want Billy turning on her, like she's wary about what he might do if he fully came into his
Nobody
power
else
and
even
recognized
knows
that he had
about it
control
either.
of everything around him, godlike inside
Only
this hex.
she
Like, he's
does.
basically God inside this hex. My early theory, though, is that doesn't extend to Rio as Death, the cosmic entity. She's probably not subject to what happens inside this hex. So, like, if Billy tried to fight her inside this, he wouldn't be able to kill her. But you remember the big twist at the end of WandaVision? The twist is that she put sigils inside her hex, and the idea is that when she put the sigils up, she basically became goddess inside here and could do anything she wanted. Like her quote at the end of WandaVision was, "The witch who places the sigils writes the rules," meaning that she controls all of reality.
So
like
she
a
could
god
kill
inside
anyone,
her hex
I'm
here.
guessing.
It's the same probably for Billy too, but he just doesn't realize it yet. There are a couple more queer
I don't
jokes when
know.
Agatha refers to
It
Billy
gets tricky.
as she when they're accusing each other for who messed up the tarot. Billy also makes another joke like that when he says he's a queer ent. Lily then makes another mistake trying to read Billy's tarot until she realizes that it's hers that she should be reading, her own future she should be reading. She pulls the Magician card, which is a reference to him being the Scarlet Witch's son, having god-tier magic. When she says he has the ability to turn all of his goals into reality, I think this is meant to be another confirmation that he accidentally created his own hex, which is his version of the Witch's
Goes
Road,
to
warped
reality
reality,
with
one of his
magic.
comic book powers like
That's
Scarlet Witch, and he
that's a
controls
dream.
reality in here. He can turn his goals, his ideas, into reality by warping reality. The thing that's missing for him, the Sun card, represents his reunion with Tommy, his brother that he's currently looking for. Lilia then goes back to talk to her grandmother again, and when she says death comes for us all, it's a reference to her accepting her own death eventually, but also the big reveal on Rio being the cosmic entity Mistress Death. She literally tells Lily after this, all roads lead to me, meaning that everyone will eventually die
Or
and have to
shadowing
meet her.
that
But it's also her
she's
grandmother
coming for
basically
her.
telling her to just accept it because dying isn't the end, it's the beginning. Like they explained that during the Moon Knight series, is that death in the MCU just represents your consciousness traveling to an alternate plane of existence, like an alternate dimension. So it's meant to be the end of one journey and the beginning of another, which is why at the end of this episode, her grandmother tells her in death, like they're dead now, this isn't her in the past, it's her telling her, let's begin, because it's the beginning of her next journey in this state of existence. They said at the Salem 7 chasing them through the tunnels, then she jumps back into the trial, realizing that she should be reading her future, pulls the Three of Pentacles,
They cut
which
it
is a
close,
reference to her
too.
having the new coven working together to solve the trials, the Knight of Wands, which is a reference to Alice, the High Priestess, a reference to Jen. The Three of Swords is a reference to Agatha. You could also call it a reference to her triple goddess of her brooch, the Maiden Mother in Crone. In the Tower reversed is a callback to Billy's bar mitzvah, representing him in his transformation from Billy Maximoff into Billy Kaplan, or Billy and William's consciousness sort of fusing and then becoming a single person. Then as she realizes that Rio is the cosmic entity death, she pulls the death card, and they do a bunch more flashbacks to confirm that too. Notice how Agatha yoinks the card before Lilia can say the full phrase out loud so the other witches can't hear her, but
Nah,
she
she
later
wasn't trying to
repeats it
die,
so
that's why.
everybody understands that, like everyone's on the same page. She calls Death the original Green Witch, which is also meant to be a reference to what Rio told them when she showed up on the road, like, I am the Green Witch, like capital the, as in the original one. Love that their exit in the trial is through the Iron Maiden. Like all these different
But they
exits
know
in the
now.
trials are these
She told
grisly
them
types of pop
that
culture
that's
deaths,
death,
like
so
them
be
crawling
careful.
through the oven during episode 3 from Hansel and Gretel. Then she tells Agatha her future to duck when someone calls her a coward in next week's episode probably, gives Billy his journal back, that'll probably come in handy the last couple of episodes, so keep your eye on that, then winds up sacrificing herself to stop the Salem 7, and I think they are trying to tell you that they died in this episode, so no more Salem 7 in next week's episode, clearing the path for death to be like the big challenge that they have to face. There are a couple other bits
Agatha's
of
gonna
lore
have
that
to
she
choose a
reveals too, like, did you
side,
know what happens
Billy
to a
or
trial after you
Death.
complete it? Bad things happen as she flips the card, which is also meant to be a reference to the Tower reverse that she
Reverse.
said
Uno
during episode
reverse.
6. Gravity reverses and the Salem 7 are impaled on the roof, which is now the floor, and she also winds up dying too when she eventually lets go. She eventually loses her grasp and falls, referencing the vision she had of herself falling through that black void. But I also think what's happening here too, like when the room is breaking down, this is inside Billy's hex. So I think the idea is that just like inside WandaVision, inside Wanda's hex, when she didn't need things, they would basically just break down. So I think what's going on here is that because Billy unconsciously doesn't need this part of his hex anymore, it's just slowly breaking down. So even though you might be bummed out that it seems like Lilia is dead, it's always possible, like maybe
So the
she
hex is
survives the end of
just
this
where
series.
they're
But the way
at,
they play
basically.
that ending with her getting that resolution with her grandmother, it really
Like
does
it's
make it
not
seem like
far,
she's
like a
actually
whole
permadead.
Westview
Then over the actual end
community.
credits, they play Jim Croce's Save Time in a Bottle, because that's Lilia's ability, basically, seeing across time. The really big thing next week, like I said, is them confronting Rio, aka confronting death. Because, like I said, I think Rio wanted all the dead bodies of the witches. He wanted to claim them because they were past their due. But also, who would Rio want if not Billy? Because he was supposed to die when the hex came down, and he broke the rules, according to Agatha. Like she said, big deal, you broke the rules. Who cares? You
Oh yeah.
survived.
Rio's gonna
Rio
go after
probably
him.
wants to claim his soul. So
'Cause
early
he broke
theory
the
right now
rules.
is Agatha will try to sacrifice herself to save Billy.
That's what I think too.
Everybody post all your predictions in the comments below, and if there's any other Easter eggs or
But,
references from this episode
didn't
that
they
I
say
didn't talk
Agatha
about in the
can't
video,
die?
write them below in the comments.
I
Like,
don't
do
know.
you actually think that Billy accidentally created his own version of a hex, and that's what they're walking down, not the actual real Witch's Road? What I'll do is I'll post my episode 8 and episode 9 trailer video
Can't
tomorrow.
wait for that.
Also because Venom The Last Dance is out this week, like I just posted my review video for that. I'll link it at the end of this, but I'll be doing a post-credit scene video, full Easter eggs breakdown for that movie. That'll be up in the next couple days as the movie comes out, so be sure to go see that as soon as possible.
Yeah, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Thanks for watching.